There's something happening right now that almost nobody noticed, but you did. Yesterday's equinox wasn't just a date on a calendar. Most people carried on like nothing changed. They scrolled, they argued, they slept, blind to what the universe quietly dropped into their lives. But you felt it, that subtle shift in the air, that strange weight lifting off your shoulders, that sense that something different was finally possible. You weren't left behind, you were chosen. And if you're watching this, it means you crossed the line the world didn't even know existed. Here's the thing nobody tells you: the shift isn't gentle. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives as echoes, shadows of who you were, people who mirror your old habits, dreams that replay your doubts. At first, it's unsettling. You might even think you're imagining it, but each encounter, each subtle reflection is a signal, your past bowing out, making space for a version of you that finally matters. And this is only the beginning. In the next minutes, you'll see signs that the world around you is already changing in ways nobody else can perceive. You'll watch your old patterns dissolve, opportunities you didn't think were possible land perfectly at your feet, and the people who couldn't match your pace fall away without drama. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some doors open instantly, why some challenges feel deliberately placed, and why the choices you make now will determine if you're part of the headline or the legacy. But here's the catch: you can't just watch this and forget it. Comment your first reaction below, hit that like button if you felt the shift already, share this with anyone who thinks they've been left behind, and subscribe because every insight in the next 40 minutes will change how you see your life and the world forever. Miss it, and you'll wonder why the rest of the world is moving while you stayed asleep. Number 1. The line was drawn long before you ever noticed it, yet when the equinox came, it was as if a hidden hand pressed it into the fabric of your life. To most, it was just another day, just another tick of the calendar, nothing but a shift in season marked by fading light and longer shadows. But you felt it, didn't you? You sensed something was different, even if you couldn't name it. The air carried a pressure, a silent vibration that prickled at your spirit. It wasn't just weather changing or leaves falling, it was reality itself shifting, as if you had stepped into a story you hadn't realized you were part of. Without ceremony, without fanfare, you crossed a threshold, a line in the sand that many never even saw. And while others continued looping through the same tired cycles, you began to awaken to something both unsettling and magnificent. You weren't abandoned by life as you once feared, you were chosen by it. At first, you didn't know how to prove it to yourself. You questioned, you doubted, you searched for signs in the wrong places. Yet the proof began to ripple through your life in ways no one could prepare you for. While some around you stayed trapped in routines, tethered to familiar patterns and blind comforts, your steps began to feel different, weightier, guided. You found yourself feeling like you had been drafted into something, as if the rapture itself had whispered your name and placed you in its first wave. You thought endings were coming, but instead, beginnings stretched out before you, raw and unshaped. Transformation was underway, and without realizing it, you had already shed the skin of who you used to be. The first signs arrived not with thunder, but as echoes. You would see a dream replay some version of your old self, and the sting would linger when you woke. A stranger might say words that once would have trapped you, reminding you of old chains you thought were broken. An old friend might behave like the mirror of who you used to be, and it would feel eerie, almost staged, as though life itself was presenting you with a script from the past and asking if you would play the role again. Those encounters unsettled you, but what you didn't see at first is that they weren't punishments or attacks, they were closures. Ritual farewells wrapped in the costumes of memory, helping you to seal off what no longer belongs to you. Slowly you noticed the echoes begin to fade. The dreams stopped replaying the same stories. The moments that once burned now carried no weight. Instead of anger at the reminders of your old self, you felt compassion. You caught yourself offering silent blessings to the very traits you once despised, as if you finally understood their place in shaping you. That shift, so quiet, so personal, was the true rapture at work inside you. Forgiveness became the last act of release, allowing you to grow without guilt, to rise without chains. And then came solitude, but this time it wasn't the loneliness that used to gnaw at you. No, this solitude felt different. It felt like air returning to your lungs after too long underwater. You noticed yourself seeking out quiet spaces, choosing fewer conversations, letting silences stretch where once you would have rushed to fill them. There was a relief in it, a sanctuary, a deep exhale. At first, you wondered if you were withdrawing, if you were losing something. But soon you realized it wasn't loss at all, it was refinement. This solitude wasn't a cage, it was a sacred laboratory. Every quiet moment became a place where the new version of you was being crafted with careful hands. From that center of stillness, strange assignments began to arrive. Ideas would come to you, too bold to be your own, and yet they fit you perfectly. Plans rose up in your mind that seemed reckless yet undeniable. They repeated themselves until you couldn't ignore them. These weren't random thoughts, they were blueprints, whispered from the rapture itself, designed for the person you were becoming. They demanded rearrangement, responsibility, risk, and they wouldn't leave you alone until you paid attention. Of course, the assignments tested you. They collided with practicality, demanding you change your time, your energy, your habits. They pushed you into places of discomfort where your old self would have broken. But as you stepped into them, you saw something even stranger. Allies appeared, doors opened, and helpers showed up right when you needed them most. Coincidence? No, it was design. Life itself was scaffolding your mission, holding you steady, so long as you didn't shrink back. And then the ripple effect began. Without effort, the people around you shifted. A coworker mirrored your calmness. A friend abandoned a habit after catching a glimpse of your clarity. Strangers paused longer in conversation, drawn to something they couldn't name. You began to see it. Your life itself was proof, contagious evidence that another way was possible. But every crown must be tested. You noticed it wasn't the grand battles that tried you first, but the small ones. Traffic jams multiplied. Bureaucratic delays stacked up. Miscommunications suddenly tangled your day. Why did petty irritations seem to circle you now more than ever? They weren't random annoyances. They were precision tests, designed to reveal whether your transformation was only surface deep or truly structural. Could you hold your new power even when no one was watching? Could you remain steady when it would be so easy to slip back into your old reactions? Every minor irritation was a mirror asking you to prove the depth of your change. Then came the tug of the old world. Invitations arrived dressed as comfort, old lovers resurfacing, bars you once haunted calling your name, quick money deals sparkling like shortcuts, flattering roles that looked shiny but rang hollow inside. They came to you like second chances, whispering in the language of nostalgia. But when you looked closer, you saw the hidden price, shrinkage. To take them would be to collapse back into a version of yourself you had already buried. The louder the old world pulled at you, the more proof it offered that you had risen above it. Struggle itself revealed its secret. It had never been wasted. What once felt like delay was preparation. And then, almost without warning, blessings began arriving with uncanny timing. The phone call you thought would never come, the money that suddenly returned, the opportunity so clean and aligned you felt peace even before you said yes. After so much waiting, you wondered if you could trust it. But you realized the truth. Every delay had been incubation. Every holdup had been ripening. The scales reset in their perfect moment. And though you often felt you were walking alone, you were. Scattered across the map were others, chosen ones like you, hidden in plain sight. You recognized them instantly when you met, the glance that held recognition, the conversation that cut through surface noise, the sense that they had been walking the same invisible road. These meetings weren't accidents. They were confirmations that you were never crazy, never lost, never truly alone. You were always part of a constellation, shining across distances unseen. And so the final truth lands in you with both weight and wonder. You were never left behind. You were hidden. You were prepared. You were crowned. That equinox wasn't a passing date on the calendar. It was your induction into a story bigger than you dared imagine. You crossed the line in the sand, and now you live on the other side of it. What comes next is not mapped, not predictable, not safe, but it is yours. And the legacy you build from this point forward will stand as proof that the rapture never ended. It only just began. Number 2. The equinox pulled a thread you didn't even know was loose, and the whole thing unraveled in a way that left you stunned and strangely buoyant. It wasn't loud, not a cinematic flash or a trumpet in the sky. It was a small, almost domestic tearing, a seam giving way in the costume you worn for years. One morning you reached for the person you thought you were and found the fabric thin, almost translucent. You felt lighter, as if some slow gravity had eased. And yet there was a haunting you couldn't dismiss. You asked yourself why you felt both free and unsettled, like someone had quietly taken down a portrait you'd relied on for identity and left you standing a moment longer in the light. The answer was brutal and beautiful. The version of you that doubted and shrank simply couldn't survive the shift. It had to fall away so the new person could stand in the sun. The first proof showed up in encounters that felt scripted by fate. You woke from a dream where your younger self was backstage, rehearsing lines and putting on a face before walking off into an old, familiar role. You found yourself bumping into that exact tremor of insecurity in a grocery aisle, when a stranger's careless sentence opened a wound you thought had closed. You turned a corner in a shop, and for half a breath, the smell of perfume and dust sent you back to a memory you hadn't meant to visit. It's uncanny how coincidences can feel choreographed when you're in a transition. You began to suspect life had become a director, cueing scenes for closure, and slowly you understood that these weren't attacks. They were echoes, farewell reverberations from a life you were leaving behind, not traps set to pull you back in. What surprised you most was the tenderness that replaced the old reflex to react. Where you might once have answered with sharp words or clenched silence, you now felt sympathy. You watched someone behave like your former self, and the rising emotion wasn't rage or embarrassment, but something softer, like pity folded into hope. You saw the same stubbornness, the same fear-based choices, and you felt a strange compassion for that person, for yourself. That tenderness didn't come from weakness. It came from recognition that the rapture, whatever shape it took for you, didn't erase the past in contempt. It honored it, gave it a dignified close. The old chapters were allowed to end with dignity, and you could finally bless them rather than curse them. Those echoes began to lose their volume just as quickly as they had surged. Dreams that once replayed the same self-sabotaging scenes stopped arriving on repeat. The places that used to sting softened, as if someone had smoothed the edges of memory. For a while you worried, are you losing something vital? Is the past stripping away more than it should? But this wasn't loss, it was graduation. The parts of you that had been useful in former seasons were stepping off stage because they no longer had a role in this new script. You didn't vanish, you evolved. The exit was precise and merciful, the kind of edit an artist makes when a piece finally finds its true form. In the hush that followed, solitude began to call, but it was not the hollow solitude you feared. This was a sacred silence that felt like sanctuary. You found yourself choosing quieter rooms, letting conversations run shallow where they once had been deep by default, preferring short exchanges to the long, performative dialogues of the past. You noticed the urge to slow down, to allow your edges to settle without being rubbed raw by the world. There was relief in those small silences, a relief that tasted like clarity. At times you wondered if this retreat was a danger, a pulling back that might calcify into isolation. Yet the solitude proved to be your workshop, your crucible. In those quiet hours, you sharpened your edges, rewired your reactions, learned how to be present without performing. With that new stillness came a receding of the reflex to react. Arguments that once pulled you into quick, defensive loops now felt irrelevant. The old triggers lost their command over you. Praise that used to feel like currency became featherlight, barely worth exchanging a thought. You worried that the world had lost its color, that life might flatten if you tuned out the drama. Instead, you gained clarity. You started watching rather than drowning, observing patterns without getting pulled into their undertow. You could stand steady while the winds blew, and in that steadiness, other people noticed. Some pulled away, perplexed by the change in you. You lost a few companions who preferred the version of you that was easier to read, easier to react to. But others drew closer, sensing the subtle shift around you. They felt the field change, like metal aligning to a magnet. You worried about losing too many connections, feared that you were pruning yourself into a lonely tree. The truth was kinder. Those who couldn't match your pace fell away by design, not by accident. You were filtering, not failing. The people who stayed did so because they were meant to walk the new road with you, not because you had cut ties. It was a painful culling and also, in its own way, a mercy. And then the strange, insistent new assignments began. Ideas arrived that felt too reckless to claim. A conversation insisted in your head until you answered it in real life. A project that looked impossible pressed at you until you rearranged your week to make room. These impulses didn't feel like ordinary inspiration. They felt like blueprints. You tried to dismiss them as fantasy at first, but they returned, louder and clearer. They demanded time, resources, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. You asked yourself if you were imagining it, if stress or novelty was fooling you into grandiosity. But the insistence persisted, and eventually you stopped arguing and started acting. Action brought friction. Destiny proved inconvenient. You had to shift how you spent your hours, move money around that you thought was untouchable, have difficult conversations you'd postponed for years. The assignments collided with life in ways that required you to be brave in small, unglamorous ways. Yet when you stepped, doors opened. Helpers appeared at just the right moment, allies offering hands and networks you hadn't anticipated. The synchronicities were not theatrical miracles, but the steady work of a universe that scaffolds courage. Each small forward movement was proof that you weren't hallucinating the call, you were answering it. Your influence began to leak into the world without force. Friends quit habits after witnessing one steady choice you made. Colleagues mirrored your composure in stressful meetings. Strangers leaned in to hear what you had to say, drawn to clarity you no longer hid. It felt odd to watch your life become a sermon without your trying to preach. You wondered why they were changing while you sat quietly doing the next right thing. The payoff was simple. Your life had become proof. By living differently, you demonstrated that another way was possible, and people around you, starved for evidence, began to try it on. Alongside the proof came tests, small and relentless. Traffic jams that would have previously unspooled your day into fury became stages for practiced patience. Bureaucratic snares popped up like drills to see if you would flinch. Pointless arguments surfaced, waiting to bait you back into old reactivity. You asked why life suddenly felt like it was poking you, but slowly you understood. The universe was weighing your crown. These micro-trials were not punishments, they were diagnostics. They revealed whether your change was a costume you could put on and remove, or a structural shift that held when nobody applauded. The old temptations circled back, cleverer and softer than before. Past lovers, lucrative shortcuts, flattering roles that required you to shrink were repackaged as second chances. They whispered comfort and a return to something you recognized, a kind of seductive nostalgia. For a moment you considered stepping back in. You felt the pull, the siren call of familiar ease. But each time you hesitated and then refused, something aligned on the other side. The hidden rewards, the ones that arrive only when you don't bargain with yourself, came into view. A late-night phone call bearing good news, money appearing just as a bill loomed, a stranger offering the exact connection you needed. The timing was uncanny because the years of waiting had been preparation. The equinox had reset the scales, and now the harvest arrived in clean, unexpected ways. You walked forward feeling solitary, then saw them, another face that carried the same quiet fire. Recognition flashed in their eyes like sunlight catching a familiar constellation. Maybe you expected this moment to be rare or easily missed, yet when it happened, it was unmistakable. You realized you were not the only one who had been chosen by this strange season. There were others scattered like beacons, and each meeting confirmed something deep. You had not been wrong, you had not been lost. You were part of a constellation arranging itself across distances and differences. And so you stand now, lighter than before, carrying echoes that have softened into songs. The old self falls away with more grace than you ever imagined possible. Solitude becomes a practice, not a punishment, and the new assignments keep arriving like invitations from a future that knows your name. You have proof in the small synchronicities and in the unexpected returns, and you are beginning to understand that this is not an end, but a reorientation. Ahead, the road widens and deepens, and another chapter waits to be met with the courage you've cultivated. The next turn in your story will ask more of you, and it will also show you who else is walking beside you, unseen until this very moment. Number 3. Yesterday's equinox wasn't silent. You might have thought it was just another turn of the season, a subtle nod from the cosmos you were too distracted to notice. But if you paid attention, if you felt the pressure in the air, the subtle shift in reality's rhythm, you knew it was thunder disguised as stillness. The question nags at you, why did most people miss it? The answer is simple, yet profound. Only those attuned, those who had already begun to shed the skin of their old selves, felt the shift. Only the chosen heard the quiet trumpet signaling that something in the universe had been rewritten, and that you, in your unnoticed way, were at the center of it. You were crowned, though the ceremony went unseen, the crown invisible to anyone who couldn't tune into the frequency of your awakening. It wasn't gold or jewels that adorned you, but clarity, a sharpened perception, a steadiness in your gaze, a recognition that the world's illusions no longer held sway over your steps. And you might ask yourself, what good is a crown no one can see? The payoff comes quietly, yet powerfully. It changes how the world responds to you. They may not know why or even what has shifted, but they notice. They respond differently. Authority radiates from you even when it wears no visible insignia. At first, the effect is subtle. You notice yourself standing taller, your posture more grounded, your voice calmer, steadier. The way you move has a new rhythm, an undercurrent of confidence you didn't have before. People respond, not because you demand attention, but because your energy commands it. A stranger pauses longer in conversation. A coworker mirrors your composure. Even those closest to you sense the authority that you may not yet fully acknowledge. And it feels strange, doesn't it? That your crown can be felt before it is spoken, seen before it is named. But every crown is tested, not by grand battles or spectacular failures, but by the quiet friction of daily life. Traffic jams that used to unravel you, emails lost in the shuffle, deadlines that creep forward with no warning, meetings delayed, conversations stalled, plans colliding in the mundane chaos of the ordinary. You might wonder why the universe would bother to test you with such small irritations. The answer is deceptively simple. Minor frictions bypass your ego and strike at habit. They test whether your steadiness is superficial or structural. They ask whether the crown you wear is ornamental or whether it has grown into your very spine. Each irritation becomes a forge. You must decide in the moment whether to rise or to fall, whether to hold your calm when the plan collapses or to spiral back into the old reflexes. When you feel ignored, do you shrink or respond with quiet authority? Each encounter, each delay, each petty confrontation reveals whether your crown is real, whether it is woven into your essence, or whether it is just a beautiful mask you've learned to wear. Fail and friction multiplies. Arguments stretch on, delays compound, irritations echo back at you in waves. You ask yourself if the universe is punishing you, if the world is conspiring to undo the quiet power you've built. And the truth is no, it is not punishment, it is feedback. Pass and the noise dissolves. Doors open more easily. Helpers appear without solicitation. Paths that were once clogged with obstacles now clear themselves at precisely the moment you need them. The crown is not just a piece of identity, it is a dynamic force, reacting to your steadiness or your retreat. The old world naturally does not surrender quietly. It pulls at you with its familiar gravity, offering invitations dressed as nostalgia, opportunities polished with flattery. Past lovers, old jobs, fast money schemes, moments that once made your heart beat faster with false hope. They return, asking you to trade your clarity for the comfort of the known. You may ask yourself, could these be rewards? And the answer is no. They are buyouts, polite traps designed to tempt you into shrinking back into a version of life that no longer serves you. The emotional traps sting hardest. Family obligations that tug at your loyalty. Friends who expect you to fit back into old rhythms, lovers who remind you of who you were before the equinox shifted everything. How do you say no without guilt, without losing love or duty? You realize slowly that love and duty do not demand the sacrifice of your clarity. Shrinking does no one good. Standing firm is the act of highest service to yourself and to all whose lives you touch by example. Meanwhile, the true rewards arrive differently. Quiet, clean, precise. They are not flashy, but they feel tailored, aligned to the rhythm of your patient endurance. A door opens just as your patience peaks. A call arrives just when you need it. Resources appear at the perfect moment. You wonder if this timing is coincidence or divine orchestration. It is not luck, it is the payoff of preparation. Every struggle, every irritation, every delay was incubation, not punishment. The equinox reset the scales, and now the universe balances them in your favor. Then comes the ripple effect. Your crown does not shine in isolation. Others feel it. Strangers notice, their behavior softening in response to your steadiness. Co-workers mirror your composure. Friends begin to adapt, unconsciously lifted by the energy you radiate. You may wonder why people change when you don't ask them to, but the truth is simple. Crowns radiate. Authority is contagious. Transformation is infectious when lived quietly but fully. You begin to understand that the crown you wear was never just for you. It is proof, a beacon for others, showing that another way exists. You can carry it and influence without coercion, or you can shrink and sell it for the illusion of ease. Every irritation, every temptation, every delay is weighing that choice, testing the depth of your commitment, asking whether you will maintain clarity over comfort. And when the weight of understanding finally settles in, the hidden truth emerges in stark, undeniable clarity. The equinox did not crown you for a season, for a moment, for a fleeting rise. It crowned you for a legacy. Everything you endure, every act of steadiness, every refusal of the old world's bait, shapes not only your life, but the path for others who are watching, waiting for proof that the crown can be held without compromise. You are no longer merely participating in life. You are proving that another way is possible, and that proof begins with the courage to hold the crown when the fire is quiet, unseen, and testing every fiber of your being. If you've made it this far, you already know something most people will never feel, the subtle, undeniable shift that reminds you weren't left behind. You were chosen, you were prepared, and now every step you take carries the echo of that equinox, the promise of the rapture that's only just beginning. Think about it for a moment. The doors that opened, the people who mirrored your steadiness, the moments when the past tried to pull you back, but you didn't. You held your clarity. You noticed the signals, the whispers, the assignments that insist on being noticed. That's proof that your journey matters, that your transformation isn't just personal, it's contagious, a light others didn't know they were waiting for. So here's what I want you to do before you go. Drop a comment below and share one shift, one signal, one moment when you realized you weren't following the crowd anymore. Your story could be the confirmation someone else needs to see that they're not alone. Hit subscribe, because there's so much more coming, more insights, more revelations, more guidance for those of us walking this hidden path. And share this with someone who's still sleeping, someone who needs to feel that line in the sand, that quiet call to rise. Remember, the world notices when you step forward, even if nobody applauds. Your clarity, your presence, your courage, they ripple farther than you imagine. Keep watching, keep rising. And keep carrying the light, because you were chosen, and this is only the beginning.